Support comes from Mosby Building Arts. This year, put your trust in Mosby Building Arts for fresh designs and the elevated remodeling experience you deserve. Inspiration at callmosby.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Now that we're more than a week removed from Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe's State of the State speech, it's pretty clear that the biggest news that came out of that address was a plan to phase out the state's income tax. The proposal, which is contingent on voter approval, would end the income tax over a 5-year period and replace much of the lost revenue with an expanded sales tax on services. As Kehoe explained to St. Louis Public Radio last week, he sees the plan as a way to spur population growth.
The general revenue that we collect from Missouri income taxes is nearly $9 billion. And if you put $9 billion back into Missourians' pockets, I believe they'll spend the money and it will have a more positive effect than if government was spending that money.
But critics of the proposal say that getting rid of the income tax could either send the state into a fiscal calamity or soak consumers with higher prices because of a bolstered sales tax. And Democratic House Minority Leader Ashley Aune of Kansas City said this month that's not a responsible approach given the state's budgetary problems.
He's already provided a preview of the hard times to come by proposing $600 million in core cuts in his proposed fiscal year 2027 state budget and underfunding K-12 public schools by at least $190 million. And if tax hike Mike gets his way, the financial crisis will get progressively worse.
One Republican lawmaker who has been at the forefront of the income tax issue for a long time is State Senator Ben Brown, who represents Franklin, Gasconade, Warren, and Osage counties, as well as part of West St. Louis County in the Missouri Senate. He joins us now to talk about the future of the state's income tax. Senator Brown, welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Hey, Jason. Great to be back on the show.
You have been on the, quote, Missouri shouldn't have an income tax train for a while. Why do you think the state would be better off without it?
I absolutely have. I think this is a real opportunity for us to establish ourselves as a real leader in our region and put us at a competitive advantage compared to those that, the states that we directly compete with, those that directly border us. Our population growth has been relatively stagnant for some time. And, you can look at data that really, it's a great indicator as to why that's the case. Last year, when I was carrying the Senate version of the income tax elimination bill, I really dug into the numbers. I was looking at growth trends. And so I have, based on 2024 numbers, you look at the top 5 states that are experiencing the most growth. 3 out of the top 5 have an income tax rate of 0%, and 4 of the top 7. And then, I'm kind of a little bit of an analytic nerd, so what I did is I took all the data and I put it on a spreadsheet, and I just narrowed it down to just Missouri and the 8 states that border us, just to see how we stack up compared to those we are in the most direct competition with. And what I found in Missouri, we're towards the bottom in terms of lowest income tax rate. At the 2024, it was 4.8%. That would put us in 6th place. The 5 states that are ahead of us in terms of a lower income tax rate are also the 5 states that happen to be ahead of us in terms of population growth. The 3 states that all have a higher income tax rate are also the 3 states that happen to be lagging behind us in terms of population growth or loss. So, while obviously income tax rate is not going to be the only determining factor when businesses are deciding where to move, but the data it's really undeniable that it is one of the most predominant factors.
If Missouri did get rid of its income tax, it would join Alaska, Washington State, Wyoming, New Hampshire, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, South Dakota, and Nevada. But several listeners pointed out that those states get their taxes in other ways. Jessica Rose wrote on TikTok, I lived in Texas, and the property taxes were 4 times higher than they are in Missouri. The government will get their taxes one way or another. Full disclosure, my sister lives in Texas, and she told me basically the same thing. So what would you say to the argument that getting rid of the income tax isn't really a cost saving for Missourians if taxes go up elsewhere?
Yeah, I would say that's a very static form of analysis when you really need to be looking at it in dynamic terms. That doesn't account for any population growth, any additional economic activity that will occur. I mean, you have to think about the fact that essentially just about every Missourian has an income will see a 4.7% annual increase in the amount of income they have. That's 4.7% that all those individuals have that could be disposable income. That means more dining out at restaurants, more shopping. And every time you're out there, there's some kind of business transaction that's bringing in additional tax revenue through sales tax. And then those businesses, as a small business owner myself, a lot of people I think don't realize just how many points through that process as money comes into the business and works its way and is paid out to employees, paid out to vendors, all the points at which that money is taxed. So by spurring this additional economic activity, that's actually going to increase the revenue coming in. So it's important to keep in mind that as the volume of business transactions go up, and set aside even the growth we'd see due to any additional population and businesses that this attracts, the taxpayers are getting the raise. It translates to more disposable income, and as that number increases, that it will also bring the sales tax rate down because there's a provision in this joint resolution that prohibits a windfall to the government. So if you're having more sales tax coming in, we can't have more revenue than the previous year. So they would have to adjust the sales tax rate down to balance that out.
So when I mentioned those other states, they all have something that draws a lot of revenue. Maybe with the exception of like Wyoming, South Dakota, and New Hampshire. Though South Dakota and Wyoming do have are large tourist destinations. But Nevada has gambling. Texas and Alaska have oil and natural gas. Tennessee and Florida have a lot of tourist attractions. What do you think that Missouri has that's similar to those states that could bring in a lot of revenue if the income tax goes away?
Well, I mean, you do have a point that some do have tourism, states like Florida and Nevada, as you mentioned. And some have, people made the point that some have significant oil resources like Texas and Alaska. But keep in mind, there are also states like New Hampshire and South Dakota without either. Missouri, we do have some tourism. We are centrally located. There are a lot of transportation that occurs throughout our state. And I think that makes it an attractive place for people to move to. If we just remove those barriers, we are lagging behind all our neighbors, and I think that is the reason why our growth has been stagnant up to this point, despite the fact that Missouri does have a whole lot to offer.
Let's move to Kehoe's plan specifically. Kehoe wants to expand the state's sales taxes on services. He pointed specifically to digital subscriptions like Audible. I brought up Fortnite Battle Pass because I have a subscription to that, and I guess it would go from $11.99 to whatever the sales tax is, so $12.46 a month or whatever. But voters banned these taxes in 2016. Why do you think they're going to reverse this in 2026, especially if there's a lot of interest groups that do not want to be taxed that are going to spend a lot of money to defeat this plan?
Well, I think that, there will be an expansion to a certain extent. So you will see expansion on some services. But keep in mind, assuming the sales tax rate is around where it is right now, and this will be determined by the General Assembly. They will have to establish what these triggers are exactly. And, that will be a determining factor in what the sales tax rate is. And then it will be balanced out with the volume of transactions that occur as well. So that will all play into the sales tax rate. But assuming it's around where it is now, or even if you assume that it went up to a certain extent, you're still getting a 4.7% raise in the amount of money that you're getting on that paycheck every week. So, think about, I've asked people this last year when I was discussing this, the version of the bill that came through last year. Like, what percentage of your paycheck do you think that you spend on services? And you get, maybe 10%, like 15, 20% usually would be the answers I got. Okay, so if you have to pay an additional 4 or 5, like say even 6% more on just, go with like the higher answers I got, like 20% of your purchases, you're still coming off way, way ahead in the long run. You're still receiving more money than the additional money that you're expending at that point. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's just really a no-brainer that you're going to benefit from this. And then with the added factor of, we're signaling to the rest of the country, and I think how the state markets this is an important thing too. We need to get the messaging out, assuming this is passed by the voters. We need to get the messaging out to the rest of the country that this is the path that we're on. Missouri is open for business. Come here, join us, and just really demonstrate that Missouri is a great place to come live, raise a family, or start a business.
Kehoe has also said he does not want the sales tax expansion on services to include agriculture, healthcare, or real estate. I'm going to be honest with you, Senator. There's probably a lot of other industries that are going to lobby really hard if this passes to people like you to say, exempt us as well. If you exempt certain things from a services expansion, do you run the risk of losing so much revenue that you cannot even do basic governmental things like build roads, fund schools, protect children from abuse or neglect? I'm not talking about like broad economic incentives. I'm talking about just state government functioning if you exempt too many things.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that we do need to be cautious of, because that's also going to be the determining factor in where our overall sales tax rate ends up. For instance, if we broaden the sales tax base and we didn't have any exemptions at all, we could bring the sales tax rate potentially under 4%, so less than it is now. The governor has pointed out certain exemptions that he's going to be insistent on, such as medical services, real estate, etc. I believe in a recent interview, Speaker Patterson stated that he's going to ensure that there would be no new increased motor fuel taxes as well. There are some that do make sense, but if you open this up, you open Pandora's box, and you're giving out all these exemptions, that's going to lead to a higher sales tax rate, and that's something that we have to be very mindful of. So I think that there are a few things that have been pointed out by the governor, by the speaker, that I think you can make very good cases for. But other than that, I think that we need to be very disciplined and ensure that we're keeping that sales tax rate overall very low, too.
In the last couple minutes we have left, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a big procedural thing here, and that this has to go through the legislature to actually make it on the 2026 ballot. This past week, your Democratic colleagues have prevented gubernatorial appointments from passing. They have said they might filibuster as many things as possible in retaliation for what happened last year. Do you think you can even get this on the ballot and even have this discussion with voters in the last minute or so?
Well, I think the key thing is that we need to have communication. And I think in the Senate that is key. I have a good relationship with all my Democrat colleagues. I've worked with them on issues that nobody thought had a chance to make it through the legislature. But I think that by approaching them in a manner where I just address them and have an open, honest, and respectful conversation, I think almost all my colleagues are willing to listen when you approach it in that manner. So I think it's all about how these conversations transpire, making sure that both sides are included in the conversations. And I think it's when the communication gets shut down, I think that's when you see the breakdown and the resulting chaos or holding up of any kind of momentum that we're seeing right now.
Okay, you do have another minute, so I jumped the gun a little bit. Do you think this could actually pass? There's going to be a lot of people who are going to spend money against this. And I mean, the realtors were the people that banned sales taxes on services to begin with. Do you think that if big interest groups spend millions of dollars to try to defeat this, it may not have a good chance of passing, especially in the environment we're in where GOP-leaning ideas may not be as popular because of national sort of things?
I think that if it's on the ballot, that it will pass. I think that this is good common sense legislation. This isn't just a plan someone came up with overnight. I've spent the last couple of years sitting in meetings, we're talking with some of the best experts on tax policy in the country, and the governor's team has as well. We've gone through all the real-world examples. We've looked at examples of states that have done this incorrectly, where they've gone wrong, states that have been the most successful, identified and isolated certain metrics, like what led to success in this state versus what caused a tax reduction program to fail in another. We have learned from those mistakes, and the plan put forward is a very methodical, I get a lot of flexibility. It's very well thought out, and I think that the voters are going to see that and see the true benefit that it will provide.
State Senator Ben Brown represents Missouri's 26th senatorial district, which takes in Franklin, Osage, Gasconade, and Warren counties, as well as part of western St. Louis County. Senator, thank you again for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Jason. Anytime.
Today's episode was produced by Jason Rosenbaum.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.